They say you can feel it the moment your mate's loyalty breaks, a crack in the bond, like ice splintering across a frozen lake. They're right, but they don't tell you it feels like dying. Celeste felt it the instant she saw Louis press another woman against the oak tree, his hands tangled in golden hair that wasn't hers, his mouth tracing a path down her throat. Within hours, she would stumble into a tavern barely alive and beg a green-eyed stranger to mark her, to sever the bond before it killed her from the inside out. Within days, she would stand in a palace, wearing the mark of the most dangerous wolf in the realm, the one every pack feared, the Alpha King himself. He would look at her with something between horror and hunger and whisper, "Do you have any idea what you've done?" But that was still to come. Right now, in this moment, Celeste could only stare as Louis pulled back from Lydia Cooper, as something like guilt flickered across his face before being replaced by irritation. "We should tell her," Lydia whispered, and her voice carried across the clearing with perfect clarity. Celeste recognized that voice, had heard it at pack gatherings, always polite, always sweet. The beta's daughter, golden and lovely, and everything Celeste wasn't. "Tell her what?" Louis's response was sharp, defensive. "That I made a mistake 3 years ago? That the bond doesn't matter when it's with the wrong person?" The wrong person. The words sank like a blade between her ribs. Celeste felt it. The bond fracturing, splintering, breaking apart in her chest like shattered glass. Her wolf howled, a sound of such raw betrayal that she had to press her hand against her mouth to keep it from escaping into the air between them. 3 years of the mate bond singing between them, of planning a future, of believing in something the gods themselves had written into her soul. 3 years of trying to fit into his pack, of ignoring the whispers about her wanderer blood, of pretending she didn't notice how his family looked at her like she was something temporary, something that would eventually be corrected. She should have known. Should have seen it coming when he started taking extra patrol shifts, when he stopped reaching for her in the middle of the night, when the bond started feeling less like music and more like static, something dying by degrees. "She'll understand," Louis said, and Celeste watched him cup Lydia's face with a tenderness he hadn't shown her in months. "Once I explain that you're who I meant to be with, that some bonds are just mistakes." Celeste must have made a sound then, a gasp, a sob, something, because Louis's head snapped toward her hiding place. For a moment, their eyes met across the clearing. She saw recognition dawn on his face, saw his mouth open to form her name, saw something that might have been panic or regret flash across his features. Celeste didn't wait to find out which. She ran. The forest became a blur of green and shadow as she tore through the undergrowth, branches catching at her clothes, her hair, her skin. Behind her, she heard Louis calling her name, heard him crashing through the brush, but she was faster, had always been faster, and she knew these woods in ways he'd never bothered to learn. The bond in her chest was withering now, dying like a flower torn from its roots, and the pain of it was finally catching up to her. It felt like her ribcage was collapsing inward, like something vital was being carved out of her with a dull blade. Her wolf was keening, confused and hurt and angry all at once. By the time Celeste reached the old trading road that cut through Brackenmoor's territory, her lungs were burning and tears were streaming down her face. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her heart hammer against her ribs, feeling the bond fracture further with each breath. A mate's betrayal could kill you. Everyone knew that. The bond was sacred, woven by the moon herself, and when it broke, truly broke, it took pieces of you with it. Some wolves never recovered. Some went feral from the grief. Celeste couldn't stay here, couldn't go back to the house she shared with Louis, couldn't face his family, couldn't endure the looks of pity or the whispers that would follow. She needed to get away, needed to sever this bond completely before it destroyed her from the inside out. There was only one way to do that. The thought made her stomach turn, made her wolf whimper in protest. But what choice did she have? Before we go deeper, can you do me a favor? Tell me the city you're watching from so I can send you a hug, because what's about to unfold will leave you breathless. Celeste wiped her face with shaking hands and started walking. The tavern sat on neutral ground, 3 hours' walk from Brackenmore territory, in one of those nameless villages that existed purely to serve travelers moving between packlands, the crossroads, locals called it, though no one seemed to know if that referred to the intersection of roads or the intersection of fates. Celeste had been there once before, years ago, when her family was still alive and still wandering. She remembered it as a place where questions weren't asked and stories weren't told. A place where you could be anyone or no one at all. The interior was dim and smoky, lit by oil lamps that cast long shadows across rough wooden tables. A handful of patrons sat scattered throughout, a merchant nursing an ale in the corner, 2 women playing cards near the hearth, a hooded figure bent over a bowl of stew. Celeste made her way to the bar, feeling every eye in the room track her movement. She must look a sight, hair wild with leaves and twigs, dress torn at the hem, face blotchy from crying. The bond in her chest was a constant ache now, a wound that wouldn't stop bleeding. The barkeep, a grizzled man with more scars than teeth, looked her up and down with the practiced neutrality of someone who'd seen everything twice. "What'll it be?" "Whiskey," Celeste said, her voice rough. "The strongest you have." He poured without comment, sliding the glass across the scarred wood. Celeste downed it in one burning swallow, then pushed the glass back for another. "Rough day?" The barkeep's tone was mild, conversational. "Rough life." She drank the second pour more slowly, feeling the alcohol burn a path down her throat. It didn't help. Nothing would help except, "I need to find someone," she said quietly, not quite looking at the barkeep. Someone who would be willing to help with a bonding issue. The barkeep's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Understanding. Maybe pity. That kind of help comes with a price. Celeste's fingers tightened around the glass. "I can pay." It was a lie. She had almost nothing, just the clothes on her back and the small leather pouch of coins she'd grabbed on her way out. But she'd figure something out. The barkeep studied her for a long moment, then nodded toward the far corner of the room. "Man over there came in about an hour ago. Traveling alone, paid in silver. Might be the type you're looking for, might not. But he's got the look of someone running from something, same as you." Celeste followed his gaze to the hooded figure she'd noticed earlier. As if sensing her attention, the man lifted his head, and even across the dim room, she could see his eyes, green as deep forest shade, striking against tan skin and dark hair that fell past his collar. Their gazes locked, and something strange happened. The dying bond in her chest flickered, like a candle in a draft, and for just a moment she felt something. A pull. A recognition that made no sense. The man's eyes widened slightly, as if he felt it too. Then his expression shuddered, and he looked away, returning his attention to his stew. Celeste took a fortifying breath and crossed the room. She'd never done this in her life. Up close, he was younger than she'd expected, maybe late 20s, early 30s, with a face that was all sharp angles and quiet strength. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw, and there were faint scars along his temple that spoke of old fights. He wore simple traveling clothes, well-made but deliberately plain, and kept his hands visible on the table in a way that suggested military training. "I need your help," Celeste said without preamble. He looked up slowly, and she had the unsettling sensation of being assessed, catalogued, understood in ways that made her want to step back. His eyes were even more striking up close, not just green, but shot through with hints of silver that caught the lamplight. "Do you?" It wasn't a question. His voice was deep, rough-edged, like he hadn't spoken much recently. The barkeep said you might be willing to help with a bonding issue. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe concern. What kind of bonding issue? Celeste's throat tightened. The kind where the bond is dying and taking me with it. He was silent for a long moment, studying her face with an intensity that should have been unsettling, but somehow wasn't. She had the strange feeling he was seeing past her wild hair and tear-stained cheeks to something deeper. "Sit," he said finally, nodding to the chair across from him. She sat, her legs suddenly weak. Now that she was here, actually doing this, the reality of it hit her. She was about to ask a stranger to mark her, to create a new bond that would sever the old one completely. It was the most intimate thing one wolf could do for another, and she didn't even know his name. "Tell me what happened," he said. Celeste's throat tightened. She looked down at her hands, still trembling slightly around the empty glass. "Does it matter?" "Yes." His voice was gentle but firm. "If I'm going to do this, I need to know you're certain, that you understand what you're asking." She should have expected the question, should have prepared an answer, but sitting here now, under his steady gaze, the shame of it all came rushing back. Her mate, her God's-given mate, had chosen someone else. What did that say about her? "I saw him with someone else," she said quietly, the words barely above a whisper. "My mate, tonight. And I can't carry this bond anymore. It's killing me." She forced herself to look up at him, feeling heat creep into her cheeks. "I know how this sounds. I know what you must think of me, asking a stranger to—" "I don't think less of you," he interrupted softly. Something in his tone made her believe him. She drew a shaky breath, trying to steady herself. "How long were you bonded?" 3 years. The number felt both infinite and impossibly short. He was quiet for a moment, studying her with intensity. "The bond, what does it feel like now?" Celeste pressed her hand against her chest instinctively, as if she could hold the pieces together through sheer will. "Dying. It's been dying for months, I think. I just didn't want to see it." The admission cost her something. "But tonight it started fracturing, and if I don't sever it completely—" She couldn't finish, couldn't voice what she knew came next. "You could die," he finished quietly, his expression darkening. "Or worse." "Worse." The word came out smaller than she intended. "There are fates worse than death for a wolf with a broken bond." He said it like he knew, like he'd seen it firsthand, and the memory still haunted him. Celeste's hands were shaking again. She pressed them flat against the scarred wood of the table, but it didn't help. Her whole body felt like it was vibrating at the wrong frequency. His hand moved, slowly, deliberately, and covered hers. The touch sent a shock through her system, her wolf suddenly going quiet for the first time all night. His palm was warm, calloused, and the weight of it somehow steadied her more than anything else had. "Will you help me?" Her voice came out breathier than she intended. He didn't pull his hand away. If anything, his thumb traced a barely there circle against her knuckles, the gesture so intimate it made her breath catch. When he finally spoke, his voice was lower, rougher. "Do you understand what you're asking? A mark isn't temporary. It creates a new bond, one that can't be undone." The way he said bond made heat pool low in her stomach. She forced herself to meet his eyes. "I understand." "And you're willing to carry a stranger's mark for the rest of your life?" His gaze dropped to her throat, lingering there in a way that made her pulse jump. She wondered if he could see it, the frantic beat beneath her skin. "Better than dying with his." The bitterness in her words was real, but so was something else, something reckless and wanting that his presence seemed to pull from her. His expression shifted, intensity darkening his features. Not quite sympathy, but understanding, recognition, like he saw something in her that others missed. "What's your name?" "Celeste." "Celeste," he repeated, slower this time, like he was tasting it. The way his voice wrapped around the syllables made her shiver. His thumb was still moving against her hand, that maddening circle that was both comfort and provocation. He seemed to be waging some internal battle. When he spoke again, she had the distinct impression he was deciding whether to lie. "I'm Colton." "Will you help me, Colton?" He studied her face for another long moment, and she found herself studying him back. There was something magnetic about him, something that drew the eye and held it. Not just his looks, though he was handsome in a rough, unpolished way, but the way he carried himself, like someone used to command but trying to hide it. "This isn't a decision to make lightly," he said finally. "Even to save your life. You should think about—" "I've thought about it." Celeste leaned forward, desperation creeping into her voice. "I've thought about nothing else for the past 3 hours. Please, I'm not asking for forever. Just help me survive this." Colton's eyes searched hers, and she saw the moment he decided, saw something in him give way, like a door opening that had been locked for a very long time. "All right," he said quietly, "but not here. Too many eyes." They left through the back of the tavern into an alley that smelled of old rain and wood smoke. The moon was rising, almost full, casting silver light across the cobblestones. Celeste's heart was racing, her wolf pacing anxiously inside her skin. Colton led her away from the main street, into the maze of narrow lanes that threaded between buildings. Neither of them spoke. There was nothing left to say. Finally, he stopped in a small courtyard, hidden from view by high walls and overgrown vines. Moonlight filtered through the leaves, dappling the ground with shadows. "Here," he said, turning to face her. Celeste's breath caught. In the moonlight, he looked different, more dangerous, more powerful. The green of his eyes had gone darker, more intense, and she could sense his wolf now, feel the strength of it pressing against her awareness. "Last chance to change your mind," he said, but his voice had gone rough, and she realized this was affecting him too. Of course it was. You couldn't mark someone without feeling it, without the intimacy of it sinking into your bones. "I'm sure." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Colton stepped closer, and the air between them seemed to thicken, charged with something she couldn't name. He was tall. She had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes, and the scent of him washed over her. Cold mountain air and wood smoke, like he'd been traveling through high passes where nothing grew but wind-twisted trees. It made her wolf respond, despite the dying bond in her chest, made something primal in her recognize him as powerful. "It's going to hurt," he warned. "I know." She'd heard the stories. A mark created a bond, superficial compared to a true mate bond, but real enough, strong enough to sever what came before. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed her hair back from her neck. His fingers were warm against her skin, calloused but gentle, and she shivered at the contact. "Celeste." Her name was a question, one last confirmation. Colton's eyes held hers for another heartbeat, and in them she saw something unexpected, not just reluctance, but a kind of longing that matched her own. Like he was as starved for connection as she was, like he understood exactly what it meant to be broken. Then he leaned in, and she felt his breath against her throat, felt the moment his lips brushed her skin. It should have been clinical, nothing more, but there was a surprising tenderness to it that made her chest ache in an entirely different way. "I'm sorry," he whispered against her neck. "For whatever he did to you. You deserved better." The words broke, something inside her. Tears spilled over as his teeth grazed her skin, as he found the spot where neck met shoulder, as he bit down. The pain was immediate and overwhelming, not just physical, though that was intense enough, like fire spreading through her veins, but emotional. She felt the bond with Lewis rip apart completely, felt 3 years of her life tear away like flesh from bone. She would have screamed, but Colton's arm came around her waist, holding her upright, his other hand cradling the back of her head. And then, underneath the pain, she felt something else emerging, a new connection, thin as spider silk but growing stronger with each second. It wrapped around the broken pieces of her, not replacing what was lost but filling the spaces it left behind. Colton pulled back, blood on his lips, his eyes wide with something that looked like shock. The mark on her neck burned, hot and alive, already beginning to scar over in the way that marked it as permanent. "Celeste," he breathed, and there was something in his voice that made her look up despite her tears. The air between them had changed. She could feel him now, feel his presence like a second heartbeat, feel his wolf recognizing hers. It wasn't the overwhelming certainty of a mate bond, but it was real, undeniable. His hand was still at her waist, and she realized she was gripping his shirt, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that had tilted sideways. They stood there in the moonlit courtyard, breathing hard, while the new bond settled between them like something alive. Celeste could feel her wolf calming, the frantic panic of the severed mate bond giving way to something steadier. She wasn't dying anymore. She was going to survive. But the cost was written in the way Colton was looking at her, like he'd just made a mistake that couldn't be undone, like he'd stepped off a cliff without checking if there was ground below. "Thank you," she managed. Thank you." He pulled back, slightly, though his hand lingered at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "You should clean that. The mark. It'll heal faster if—" She touched her neck gingerly, feeling the raised edges of the bite, feeling the warmth of it pulse in time with her heartbeat. "Colton, don't thank me." His words came out sharper than he seemed to intend, and he took another step back, putting distance between them. She frowned, confused by the sudden shift. "Did I do something wrong?" "No, you didn't." He ran a hand through his hair, and she saw it was shaking slightly. This was a mistake." That word again, the second time in one day. It hit harder than it should have coming from a near stranger. "You said you'd help." Her voice came out small, and she hated herself for it. Hated that she could feel the sting behind her eyes, the tightness in her throat. This was supposed to be transactional. Simple. A means to an end. She wasn't supposed to care that he regretted it. "I did. Help. And now you need to go. Back to wherever you came from. Forget this happened." "Forget? I'm wearing your mark. How exactly am I supposed to forget?" Colton's jaw tightened. "The bond will fade, eventually. If we stay away from each other, it'll become background noise. You'll barely feel it." "Is that what you want?" He didn't answer, which told her everything. Celeste felt something cold settle in her chest, a different kind of hurt than what Louis had inflicted, but hurt nonetheless. "Okay, thank you for your help. I'll go." She turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Celeste, wait." She looked back. Colton's expression was conflicted, torn between pulling her back and pushing her away. "Be careful. The mark. People will know what it means. What we did. There will be questions. I can handle questions. Not these ones." He took a step toward her, then seemed to think better of it. "I'm not who you think I am." "I don't know you," she said honestly. Something flickered across his face, relief or disappointment, she couldn't tell. "Good. Keep it that way." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the alley, leaving Celeste alone in the courtyard with a stranger's mark on her neck and a bond in her chest that hummed with confused recognition. She touched the mark again, feeling it pulse warm beneath her fingers. No, not warm. Hot. Alive. Like something had woken up under her skin. Celeste jerked her hand away and wondered, with a cold, creeping unease, what she'd just done. The walk back to Brackenmore took 3 hours, and with each step, Celeste felt the full weight of her choices settling on her shoulders. The bond with Louis was gone completely now. She couldn't feel even a whisper of it, and the new bond with Colton was there instead, quiet but present, like a thread connecting her to something she couldn't see. She tried not to think about the way he'd looked at her in that courtyard, the way his voice had gone soft when he said she deserved better, the way his hand had lingered at her waist like he didn't want to let go. It didn't matter. He'd made it clear he wanted nothing to do with her. They'd helped each other in a moment of desperation, and now it was over. She'd go back, pack her things, and leave Brackenmore. Start somewhere new. Try to rebuild a life that didn't revolve around a man who'd never truly wanted her. The sun was rising by the time she reached the house she'd shared with Louis. The door was unlocked. It always was, and she slipped inside quietly, hoping to avoid him. She just needed to gather her things and go. But Louis was waiting in the kitchen, arms crossed, expression caught between guilt and anger. "Where have you been?" Celeste didn't answer. She moved past him toward the bedroom, but he caught her arm. "I'm talking to you. You disappeared yesterday. I've been worried." He stopped abruptly, his eyes going to her neck. She saw the moment he noticed the mark, saw his face go from concerned to horrified to furious in the span of a heartbeat. "What is that?" His voice was dangerously quiet. "Exactly what it looks like. You let someone mark you." It wasn't a question. "You broke our bond completely. What were you thinking, Celeste?" The hypocrisy of it was staggering. Celeste yanked her arm free. "I was thinking I didn't want to die from the bond you were destroying. So you ran off and let some random—" He stopped, nostrils flaring as he caught the scent of the new bond. His eyes narrowed. "Who? Why does that matter?" "Who, Celeste? A stranger, someone passing through, someone who was willing to help when I needed it." She kept her voice level, detached, even as something inside her recoiled at reducing what had happened to something so transactional. Louis stared at her like he'd never seen her before. "You let a stranger mark you. You called our 3-year bond a mistake while you had your tongue down Lydia's throat. So, yes, Louis, I let a stranger mark me." He flinched, and for a moment she thought he might actually feel guilty, but then his expression hardened. Do you have any idea what you've done? What people will think? I don't care what people think." "Well, I do. I have to live here. My family—" "Your family never wanted me here anyway," Celeste cut him off. "So now you can be with Lydia without any complications. You're welcome." She moved past him into the bedroom and started pulling out the traveling pack she'd arrived with 3 years ago. It didn't take long to gather her things. She'd never really unpacked, never truly believed this place was home. Louis followed her, watching from the doorway. "Where will you go?" "Away." "Celeste." His voice softened, and she hated how familiar it sounded. "I didn't mean for it to happen this way. Lydia and it just happened. I tried to fight it, but she was better." Celeste didn't look at him as she folded clothes into her pack. "More suitable, from a better family, everything I'm not." "That's not—" She finally turned to face him, and the look in her eyes made him flinch. "You know what the worst part is?" Her voice was steady, but only barely. "I knew. For months, I knew something was wrong. I could feel you slipping away, feel the bond stretching thinner and thinner, but I kept—" Her breath hitched, and she had to pause, had to force the words out past the tightness in her throat. I kept making excuses for you, kept telling myself you were just stressed or tired or that I was being paranoid. I twisted myself into knots trying to be what you needed, trying to fix whatever I'd done wrong. She pressed her hand against her chest, where the bond had finally, mercifully gone quiet. I thought if I just tried harder, loved you better, you'd look at me the way you used to, the way you look at her. A tear slipped down her cheek, and she brushed it away angrily. But the truth is simpler than that, isn't it? You just didn't want me. The gods gave us a bond, but they couldn't make you love me. And I was so desperate to believe in something, in us, in fate, in anything, that I held on to a ghost of what we had until there was nothing left of me. Louis opened his mouth, then closed it. He had nothing to say. Celeste finished packing in silence. When she was done, she slung the pack over her shoulder and walked past him without another word. Cel, wait. Don't. She stopped at the door. Just be happy with her. That's all I want. To know that this wasn't for nothing. She left before he could respond, stepping out into the morning sun with no destination in mind and a stranger's mark burning against her neck. 2 days later, the summons came. Celeste had found temporary lodging at a traveler's inn 2 territories over, paying for her room by helping in the kitchen. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She'd been considering her options, maybe head west to the coastal, Pax, or south where they said the cities were full of wolves who didn't care about bloodlines or bonds. She was carrying a tray of dishes when the royal messenger arrived, resplendent in ceremonial armor marked with the royal crest, a wolf's head wreathed in silver leaves. The common room went silent as he strode in, all eyes tracking his movement. I seek Celeste of Brackenmore, he announced, his voice carrying. Celeste nearly dropped the tray. That's me. The messenger's eyes found her, swept over her in quick assessment, then fixed on her neck, on the mark. His expression didn't change, but she saw something flicker in his eyes. You are summoned to the capital by order of His Majesty King Colton Ashford. You are to come immediately. Your travel expenses will be covered and lodging will be provided. Refusal is not an option. The room erupted in whispers. Celeste stood frozen, the tray forgotten in her hands. King Colton Ashford. Colton. The green-eyed stranger who'd marked her in a moonlit courtyard. Was the Alpha King? The messenger was staring at her expectantly, waiting for acknowledgement. Around them, the whispers had grown louder. Celeste set the tray down with trembling hands. There's been a mistake. The man he said his name was Colton, but he didn't say he was. His Majesty travels under common names when moving through the territories, the messenger said, and there was something almost sympathetic in his tone now. For his own protection. You were not informed of his identity? No, I had no idea. Her voice came out barely above a whisper. The messenger's expression softened slightly. Then I apologize for the shock. Nevertheless, the summons stands. A carriage waits outside. We leave within the hour. I need time to... 1 hour, the messenger repeated, firmer now. His Majesty was quite clear about the urgency. Celeste's mind was reeling. She'd begged the Alpha King to mark her. She'd cried in his arms while he severed her bond. She'd felt the intimacy of his bite, the tenderness of his hands, the way he'd held her like she was something precious, even as he told her to forget him. And now he was summoning her to the capital. This was a nightmare. This was... The mark on her neck pulsed warm, as if responding to her distress, and she felt it, that thread of connection reaching across the distance. She couldn't tell what he was feeling, not exactly, but there was something there. Tension, anticipation, maybe dread. He was as horrified by this as she was. The journey to the capital took 2 days by royal carriage, and they were the longest 2 days of Celeste's life. The messenger, whose name was Marcus, she learned, was polite but distant, treating her with careful respect. She wore the king's mark, which meant something, but she was clearly common-born. The other guards who accompanied them were less subtle. She caught them staring, heard their whispered conversations when they thought she couldn't hear. Never seen anything like it. A random girl from nowhere? Maybe she's some kind of spy, seduced him to get close. With those clothes? Please, she looks like she's been sleeping in stables. Celeste tried to ignore them, tried to focus on the landscape rolling past the carriage windows. They were traveling through the heart of the kingdom now, through territories she'd only heard about in stories. Rolling hills gave way to dense forests, which gave way to cultivated fields and prosperous-looking villages. And then, on the afternoon of the second day, she saw it. The capital city of Ashford rose from the valley like something from a dream. White stone buildings climbed the hillside in elegant terraces, their spires catching the sunlight. At the summit sat the palace itself, all soaring towers and graceful arches, surrounded by walls that managed to look both defensive and beautiful. Celeste had never seen anything so magnificent or so intimidating. "First time to the capital?" Marcus asked, noting her wide-eyed stare. "First time anywhere, really." She hadn't meant to admit that, but the words slipped out. Marcus studied her with new interest. "You're from Brackenmore," the messenger said. "It's small, insignificant, border territory with no real power or influence." She'd heard it enough times from Lewis's family to recite it by heart. "I was going to say remote," Marcus said mildly. "The capital must seem overwhelming." "That's one word for it." As they drew closer, the streets grew more crowded. Wolves of every rank and station filled the thoroughfares, merchants hawking wares, nobles in fine clothes being carried in sedan chairs, guards patrolling in formation. Everyone seemed to move with purpose, like they belonged to something larger than themselves. Celeste had never felt more out of place. The carriage rolled through the palace gates, past guards who saluted sharply, into a courtyard paved with white stone. Servants appeared, immediately, moving with practiced efficiency. "This way, please," a stern-looking woman in dark blue robes said, gesturing for Celeste to follow. "His Majesty has ordered rooms prepared for you in the guest wing. You'll have time to refresh yourself before..." "Before what?" The woman's expression didn't change. "Before you're presented to the king, of course." The guest wing was more luxurious than anywhere Celeste had ever stayed. Her rooms consisted of a sitting area with upholstered furniture that looked too fine to actually sit on, a bedroom with a bed large enough for 4 people, and a bathing room with a copper tub already filled with steaming water. "Clothes have been provided," the stern woman said, gesturing to an ornate wardrobe. "Someone will come to escort you to the king in 2 hours. I suggest you use the time to make yourself presentable." The door closed behind her with a decisive click, leaving Celeste alone in rooms fit for nobility, wearing a stranger's mark and trying not to fall apart. She caught sight of herself in the full-length mirror and understood the woman's pointed comment about being presentable. Her dress was travel-stained and wrinkled. Her hair was a wild tangle of dark curls, and there were shadows under her eyes from lack of sleep. She looked like exactly what she was, a nobody from nowhere who'd stumbled into something far beyond her understanding. The mark on her neck stood out in sharp contrast, dark against her pale skin, impossible to hide or ignore. Celeste touched it gently, feeling the now familiar warmth, feeling that thread of connection pull taut with awareness. He was close. Somewhere in this massive palace, Colton, King Colton, was close enough that the bond could sense him. What would she even say to him? What could she say? She'd begged him to mark her, had stood in his arms while he severed her mate bond, had felt something pass between them that she still couldn't name. and all of it had been under false pretenses. He'd lied about who he was. She'd been too desperate to ask questions, and now they were bound together in a way that couldn't be undone, and she had no idea what it meant or what he wanted from her. Celeste forced herself to move, to use the bath, to wash away the grime of travel. The hot water helped ease some of the tension from her shoulders, but it couldn't touch the knot of anxiety in her chest. When she emerged, she examined the clothes that had been provided. Several dresses hung in the wardrobe, all of them far finer than anything she'd ever owned. She chose the simplest, a deep blue gown with long sleeves and a modest neckline that almost covered the mark. But not quite. The top edge was still visible, a clear declaration of what had happened between her and the king. She was attempting to do something with her hair when the knock came. "Enter," she called, expecting the stern woman. Instead, it was a girl about her own age, with bright eyes and an easy smile. She wore servant's clothes, but carried herself with confidence. "I'm Tessa," she said cheerfully, "sent to help you get ready, though honestly, you've done most of the work already." Her eyes went to the mark on Celeste's neck, then quickly away. "Here, let me help with your hair. It's beautiful. You just need to know how to work with the curls rather than against them." Celeste found herself relaxing slightly as Tessa worked, chattering about the palace and the capital in a way that required no response. It was oddly comforting. "Everyone's talking about you, you know," Tessa said as she pinned sections of Celeste's hair back, leaving the rest to fall in loose waves. "The king hasn't taken a companion in 3 years. Not since, well," she stopped abruptly. "Not since what?" Tessa bit her lip. "Not my place to say, but let's just say His Majesty has his reasons for being careful, and then he comes back from one of his wandering trips with a mark already given, and suddenly there's a summons, and you show up looking like you've seen a ghost." She stopped again. "Sorry, I talk too much." "It's all right." Celeste met Tessa's eyes in the mirror. "I really didn't know who he was. When he marked me, I thought he was just some wandering wolf who took pity on you." Tessa's smile was gentle, understanding. "That's what he wants people to think. That's why he travels under false names, without the royal guard, without any of the trappings. He wants to see the kingdom as it really is, not the version people show the king." "Does he do it often? Travel like that?" "Few times a year. Usually comes back with stories, but nothing else." Tessa met her eyes meaningfully. "Nothing like you." Another knock interrupted them. The stern woman from before stood in the doorway. "It's time," she said. "His Majesty is waiting." The walk through the palace was a blur of marble hallways and soaring ceilings, and beautiful people who stopped to stare as Celeste passed. The mark on her neck seemed to burn hotter with each step, the bond pulling tighter until she could feel him like a beacon ahead of her. They stopped before an ornate door guarded by 2 soldiers in ceremonial armor. "His private study," the stern woman said. "He wants to see you alone first. Before..." She paused. "Before things become complicated." The guards opened the doors, and Celeste stepped through. The study was smaller than she'd expected, more intimate. Books lined the walls, maps were spread across a large desk, and windows overlooked the city below. It was the kind of room that spoke of long hours of work, of a person who took their responsibilities seriously. And standing at the window, silhouetted against the afternoon light, was Colton. He turned as she entered, and for a moment they just stared at each other. He looked different in the daylight of his own space, still wore simple clothes, no crown, no formal robes, but there was no hiding what he was anymore. The way he held himself, the authority in his bearing, the weight of command in his eyes. This was a man used to being obeyed, used to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. But there was something else there too. Something that looked like regret. Or maybe fear. Celeste, he said, and her name in his voice sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. The bond recognized him, responded to him, and she felt that pull toward him that she'd been trying to ignore for 3 days. Your Majesty. She wasn't sure if she should bow, curtsy, what the protocol was. She settled for a small nod. Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Don't. Please. Not you. What should I call you then? The question came out quieter than she intended. You didn't tell me who you were. What you were, I thought. She stopped, not even sure what she'd thought in her moment of desperation. That he was just a traveler? A rogue? Someone as lost as she was? Colton crossed the room toward her, and Celeste had to force herself not to step back. I thought you knew. At first. When you approached me in the tavern, I thought... He stopped a few feet away, close enough that she could see the green of his eyes, see the tension in his jaw. I thought you were trying to trap me, seduce the king for status or power or... But then I saw your face, saw the bond breaking inside you, and I knew you had no idea who I was. So why not tell me then? Why let me believe? Because you wouldn't have let me help if you knew. His voice was quiet but intense. You would have been too afraid, too worried about what it meant. And you needed help. Desperately. I could feel you dying, Celeste. Feel the bond tearing you apart. So I made a choice. I don't understand, she said softly. Why did you summon me here? Did I do something wrong? The panic in her voice must have shown because his expression softened immediately. No, nothing like that. Colton's jaw tightened, and she could see him struggling with something. Someone saw us that night in the courtyard. They didn't recognize me, but they recognized the marking ritual. Word spread, rumors that the king marked someone while traveling. My council demanded I bring you here, He stopped, seeming unable to finish. Her heart was racing now, dread pooling in her stomach. That you what? That I either claim you properly or sever the bond entirely. The words made her breath catch. Sever it? The thought of going through that again, of losing another bond, even this strange new one that she barely understood, made her feel sick. There are ways, rituals, dangerous ones, but... He looked away, and she thought she saw pain flash across his face. I told them I needed to meet with you first, to explain the situation, to give you a choice. A choice. Her voice came out small. She looked down at her hands, twisting them together nervously. You're the king. I'm nobody. Whatever you decide, She trailed off, not sure how to finish. Part of her wanted to say she'd understand if he chose to sever it. But another part, the part that felt the warm pulse of his mark on her neck, that remembered how safe she'd felt in his arms, didn't want that at all. She was too afraid to look at him, too afraid he'd see the truth written on her face. He took a step closer, and now she could feel the warmth radiating from him, could smell that scent of cold mountain air and wood smoke that had imprinted itself on her memory. The mark creates a bond, Celeste. You know that. And bonds, even ones like ours, they mean something. They give you rights, protection. You're not my subject right now. You're mine. The word came out rough, possessive, and immediately he seemed to regret it. That is, the bond makes you mine in the eyes of the law, which means you have the right to refuse, and the right to walk away from this entire mess. I brought you here to give you that choice, not to take it from you. What if I don't want to walk away? The question hung between them. Colton stared at her like she'd just spoken a foreign language. Celeste. Her name came out rough, almost pained. He lifted his hand as if to touch her face, then seemed to think better of it, letting it fall. Do you understand what you'd be walking into? The life you'd have as... He couldn't seem to say it. People would expect you to stand beside me. They'd scrutinize everything you do, every word you speak. They would tear you apart for not being noble-born, for not being... Enough? She finished. That's what you mean, isn't it? That I'm not enough for a king? No, Celeste, that's not what I mean at all. Then what is it? Colton closed the final distance between them, and suddenly he was right there, close enough to touch, looking down at her with those impossible green eyes. I mean that you've already been hurt, already been told you're not enough by someone who was supposed to love you. And I don't... His voice cracked slightly. I don't want to be another person who does that to you. Celeste's throat tightened. You think keeping me at a distance is protecting me? I think giving you a choice is protecting you. Real choice, not the desperate decision you made in that courtyard. I made that choice, Celeste said, lifting her chin. Desperate or not, it was mine, and I don't regret it. You should. But even as he said it, his hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek so gently it made her chest ache. Celeste, you should regret all of it. Well, I don't. She was trembling now, but she didn't pull away. Do you? His thumb traced along her jaw, and she saw the war in his eyes. I should, he said finally, but I don't. And that's the problem. The bond between them flared warm, responding to the proximity, to the touch, to the admission. Celeste felt her wolf rise, felt that pull toward him that was becoming harder to resist. What happened to you? She asked quietly. Before. Tessa said you haven't taken a companion in 3 years, that you have reasons for being careful. Colton's hand dropped away, and he took a step back. The loss of his contact felt like a physical ache. Her name was Iris, he said after a long moment. We were matched when I was 25. A political arrangement. Her family had the military alliances I needed to secure the northern borders. We tried to make it work. He turned back toward the window, his profile sharp against the light. But she didn't want me. She wanted the crown, the power. And when she realized I wouldn't be the kind of king she could control. He trailed off. What did she do? Tried to poison me, make it look like an illness. Would have worked too if my guard captain hadn't noticed the symptoms matched a particular herb that grows in the southern territories. His voice was flat, emotionless, but Celeste could feel the pain underneath. She's in exile now, married to some minor lord who doesn't care about her past as long as the dowry's sufficient. And I've been alone, Celeste finished, careful, refusing to trust anyone. Yes. He looked at her over his shoulder. And then I met you, crying in a tavern because your mate chose someone else. So broken and desperate and honest about it. You didn't want anything from me except help. You didn't even know who I was. And now I do know, Celeste said. And I still don't want anything from you except... She stopped, unsure how to finish. The truth felt dangerous, but she said it anyway. Except to understand what this is between us, because it feels like more than just a bond created to sever another. It feels... She pressed her hand against her chest, where the bond hummed warm and alive. It feels real. Colton turned fully to face her, and the look in his eyes was so intense it stole her breath. Longing, fear, something that looked almost like wonder. It does feel real, he admitted quietly, and that terrifies me. Why? His hand lifted, hovering near her face as if he was afraid she'd vanish if he touched her. Because if this is real, then I have something to lose. With Iris, losing her was a political setback. Losing you? That would destroy me. Celeste's heart squeezed at the raw admission. Then don't lose me, she said softly, reaching out to offer her hand. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere unless you send me away. Her voice steadied. What if we just try? See where this goes without deciding the ending before we've even started? Colton stared at her outstretched hand like it was both salvation and damnation. You don't know what you're asking. Then tell me. Explain it to me, all of it. The politics, the expectations, the danger, and then let me decide if I still want to try. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, he took her hand. The contact sent warmth flooding through the bond, a sense of rightness that made them both inhale sharply. Their eyes met, and Celeste saw her own wonder reflected back. This is insane, Colton said, but his fingers tightened around hers, and there was something fierce in his eyes now, a decision being made. Probably. My council is going to lose their minds, and there's a royal summit starting in 2 weeks. All the major packs will be here, including Louis, Celeste finished, her stomach dropping. He'll be here? Yes, as part of the Brackenmore delegation. Colton's other hand came up to cup her face. Which means everyone will see this mark. We'll know what it means. We'll see you standing beside me. Is that what you want? Me standing beside you? His jaw tightened, and for a moment she saw the struggle play out across his face. What I want doesn't matter if it puts you in danger. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, the touch achingly gentle. When I'm near you, I can breathe properly for the first time in 3 years. When you left that courtyard, I knew I'd made a mistake. And when the messenger told me he'd found you, he stopped, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her shiver. I want this. I want you. But the life I'm offering isn't safe, Celeste. Court is full of people like Iris, people who will see you as a weakness to exploit, a tool to use against me. They'll try to hurt you, to hurt me. And I need to know you understand that before I'm selfish enough to ask you to stay. Then show me, she said. You have 2 weeks before the summit. Show me what it means to be, whatever I am to you, and I'll decide if I can handle it. Something shifted in Colton's expression, relief mixed with determination. All right, 2 weeks. But Celeste, he leaned in closer, his forehead almost touching hers. If at any point it's too much, you tell me, and we end this cleanly. No shame, no blame, just a mutual decision that it wasn't meant to be. And what if it is meant to be? The words came out barely above a whisper. Colton's eyes searched hers, and what she saw there made her heart race. Then we'll figure it out, together. He pulled back before she could respond, but didn't let go of her hand. Come on, I should introduce you to Marcus properly. He's the one who saved me from Iris. You'll see a lot of him over the next 2 weeks. He's good at keeping people alive. Comforting. Colton's smile was small but genuine. Welcome to life at court, Celeste. It only gets stranger from here. The 2 weeks passed in a blur of lessons and stolen moments. Tessa became Celeste's guide through the labyrinth of court politics, teaching her which nobles to avoid, which customs mattered, and which rules could be bent. Marcus taught her self-defense, insisting that anyone close to the king needed to know how to protect themselves. And Colton showed her what it meant to fall in love with someone who understood being broken. They took walks in the palace gardens at dawn, before anyone else was awake. He told her about the weight of the crown, about the loneliness of making decisions that affected thousands of lives. She told him about growing up without roots, about never feeling like she belonged anywhere. They didn't touch much, both still too cautious, too afraid, but the bond between them grew stronger with each shared confidence. You asked what happened with Iris. Colton said one morning as they sat beside a fountain. But you never told me what it was like. With Louis. Before it broke. Celeste watched water cascade over stone. It was like living with a door half open. I kept thinking if I just tried harder, loved him better, fit in more smoothly, the door would open all the way. But it never did. He was always holding something back, always comparing me to some ideal I could never reach. She looked at him. Did you feel that way? With Iris? Yes, like I was performing a role. She'd smile at me across the dinner table, and I'd think, I don't know you at all. His fingers found hers on the stone bench. With you, it's different. I look at you and think, oh, there you are. His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, the gesture both soothing and possessive. Whatever this is between us, fate or chance or something neither of us planned, I want to discover it with you. Every piece of it. But the peace couldn't last. The summit delegates began arriving, and with them came the weight of scrutiny. Nobles who'd never given Celeste a second glance suddenly appeared at every turn, assessing her worth, whispering behind fans. She felt their judgment like a physical thing, the way they looked at her simple dresses, her common manners, the mark on her neck that she refused to hide. And then, on the evening before the summit officially began, Louis arrived. Celeste was in the great hall when she felt it, the ghost of the old bond, a phantom ache where something used to live. She looked up and found him standing in the entrance with Lydia. On his arm, both of them dressed in formal attire, looking like the perfect couple. Their eyes met across the crowded space. Louis went pale. Celeste? He breathed her name like a question. Before she could respond, she felt warmth at her back. Colton had materialized beside her, his hand settling at her waist with casual possessiveness. Louis of Brackenmore, Colton said, his voice carrying just enough authority to remind everyone exactly who he was. Welcome to the capital. I don't believe we've been formally introduced. Louis's gaze snapped to the king, then to the hand at Celeste's waist, then to the mark on her neck. She watched Understanding Dawn, watched his face cycle through shock and disbelief and something that looked dangerously close to rage. Your Majesty, Louis managed, bowing stiffly. This is an honor. Is it? Colton's tone was mild, but Celeste felt the steel underneath. I understand you and Celeste were previously bonded. The hall had gone quiet. Everyone was watching now. We were, Louis said carefully, but that bond it ended. Colton's fingers tightened slightly at Celeste's waist. Interesting timing. To reject your mate and then show up at my court with your new companion just weeks later. Lydia shifted uncomfortably. Her father, Beta Cooper, stepped forward with a politician's smile. Your Majesty, my daughter and Louis are truly bonded. Their connection is genuine. I'm sure it is, Colton interrupted smoothly. Just as I'm sure you understand that Celeste is under my protection now, as she wears my mark and stands at my side. The implication was clear. Touch her, and you answer to me. Cooper's smile tightened. Of course, Your Majesty. We mean no disrespect. But Celeste saw something flicker in his eyes, something calculating. The summit began the next day, and with it came the attacks. They were subtle at first. Whispers about Celeste's common blood, questions about the legitimacy of a bond formed so hastily. Suggestions that perhaps the king had been seduced, manipulated, trapped by a desperate woman seeking status. Beta Cooper was behind most of it, Celeste learned. Marcus's spies reported that he'd been meeting with other nobles, building a coalition of those who opposed the king's choice. His plan was simple: discredit Celeste so thoroughly that Colton would have no choice but to sever the bond. Then position Lydia, noble, connected, acceptable, as a proper alternative. He's going to make a move at the bonding ceremony, Marcus told them 3 days before the summit's final event. We've intercepted messages. He plans to challenge the legitimacy of your bond publicly, force a vote among the assembled packs. Celeste felt sick. Can he do that? Technically, yes, Colton said, his jaw tight. The old laws allow pack leaders to challenge a royal bonding if they believe it threatens the kingdom's stability. It hasn't been invoked in 200 years, but I'm common-born and bonded under unusual circumstances, Celeste finished quietly. I make an easy target. The pain that flashed across his face was immediate. You're not a target. He stopped himself, seeming to struggle with the words. Then more gently, we have options. I can protect you better if we sever the bond, send you somewhere safe with resources, a new name. No. The word came out smaller than she intended, but no less firm. I'm not running, not from this. Celeste, if Cooper challenges and wins, then we'll face it together. She looked up at him, her heart hammering. These past weeks with you, the walks in the garden, the quiet dinners, the way you listen when I talk about things that don't matter to anyone else. Her voice caught. I've never felt like this before. Not even with Louis when the bond was new and I thought it meant something. Colton's hands found hers, holding them carefully. Felt like what? Like I matter, not because of a bond or duty or what I can give you. She took a shaky breath. Like you see all the broken parts of me and you're not trying to fix them or hide them. You make space for them. For me. The words were tumbling out now, and she couldn't stop them. And maybe it's too soon. Maybe I shouldn't feel this way when everything is so complicated. But when I think about severing this bond, about never seeing you again, her eyes burned with unshed tears. It hurts worse than anything Louis did, because losing you would mean losing something real, something I chose. Celeste. Her name was barely a whisper. I'm in love with you, she said, and the admission felt like both relief and terror. I don't know exactly when it happened, but I know that I'd rather face whatever Cooper throws at us than spend the rest of my life wondering what we could have been. For a long moment, Colton just stared at her, his eyes bright with emotion. You think you're broken, he said finally, his voice rough. But you're the bravest person I've ever met. You're standing here telling me you love me when you have every reason to guard your heart, when I've given you nothing but reasons to doubt. You've given me everything, she interrupted softly. You've given me honesty, patience, the freedom to choose. She squeezed his hands. You've given me yourself, the real you, not the king everyone else sees. Something in him seemed to break, or perhaps finally mend. He pulled her against him with a sound that was half growl, half surrender, one hand sliding into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist. Celeste, he breathed against her lips, her name a prayer and a claim all at once. Then he kissed her. It was weeks of restraint shattering, of carefully maintained distance collapsing into desperate need. His mouth moved against hers like he was trying to memorize her, consume her, prove to both of them that this was real. The bond between them didn't just flare. It ignited, singing through her veins with a rightness that made her gasp against his mouth. She gripped his shoulders, kissing him back with equal fervor, pouring everything she felt into it, all the fear and hope and love she'd been too afraid to name. His hand tightened in her hair, angling her head to deepen the kiss, and she felt the tremor that ran through him, the barely leashed control. When they finally broke apart, he didn't let her go. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers, his thumb stroking along her jaw with aching tenderness. I love you, he said, and his voice was wrecked, raw with emotion. I love you so much I can barely think straight when you're near me. I love you enough that the thought of losing you makes me want to burn the world down. His hands cupped her face, tilting it so she had to meet his blazing gaze. You are not broken. You are not common. You are not a mistake or a weakness or anything less than extraordinary. You are mine, my mate, my choice, my future. She felt tears slip down her cheeks. Colton, I should have said it weeks ago, he continued, his thumb brushing away her tears. Should have told you the moment I realized I was falling, but I was afraid you'd think it was just the bond, or duty, or something less than what it is. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. This is real, Celeste. You and me. Then what do we do? She whispered against his lips. His eyes darkened with something fierce and protective. We fight. We show them exactly who you are, who we are together. He kissed her again, softer this time, but no less intense. And we win. The bonding ceremony took place in the grand hall, with hundreds of witnesses from every major pack. It should have been a celebration, a formal acknowledgement of the king's chosen mate. Instead, it felt like walking into battle. Celeste wore a gown of deep green that brought out the color in Colton's eyes, her hair arranged in elegant braids that left the mark on her neck visible. She held her head high as they entered, Colton's hand warm in hers, refusing to show the fear churning in her stomach. The ceremony itself was beautiful, ancient words spoken in the old tongue, the exchange of vows, the formal presentation to the assembled packs. And then, just as the final blessing was about to be given, Beta Cooper stood. I invoke the right of challenge, he declared, his voice carrying through the hall, on the grounds that this bond threatens the stability of the realm. Gasps echoed. Colton's hand tightened on hers. Explain your reasoning, the High Elder said, his ancient face grave. Cooper stepped forward. The king's mate is common-born, with no pack affiliation, no family name, no political connections. She was bonded to another man mere weeks ago, a bond that ended in scandal, and the circumstances of her bonding to His Majesty suggest desperation rather than genuine connection. He looked directly at Celeste. Tell me, did you know who he was when you begged him to mark you? The hall went silent. Every eye turned to Celeste. This was it, the moment where she could lie, try to salvage some dignity, or she could tell the truth and let them judge her for it. She thought of Colton holding her in that courtyard, of the way he'd looked at her like she was worth saving, of the past 2 weeks of falling in love with someone who saw her clearly and chose her anyway. No, she said, her voice steady. I didn't know he was the king. I was dying from a broken bond, desperate for help, and he was kind enough to give it. I didn't know who he was until after. The whispers exploded. Cooper's smile was triumphant. So you admit that you seduced the king under false pretenses? I admit, Celeste interrupted, her voice rising, that I found a man who saw me breaking and chose to help, who could have walked away but didn't, who marked me knowing it would complicate his life because he couldn't stand to watch me suffer. She looked at Cooper directly. The question isn't whether I'm worthy of him. The question is why you're so desperate to prevent this bond that you're willing to resurrect 200-year-old laws to challenge it. Because, Cooper started. Because you want your daughter positioned as queen, Colton cut in, his voice cold. Because you've been building a coalition of nobles who oppose my policies, and you thought putting Lydia beside me would give you control. He stepped forward, releasing Celeste's hand. Did you think I didn't know? That my guard captain hasn't been tracking your movements, your meetings, your plans? Cooper went pale. You're right that Celeste is common-born, Colton continued. Right that our bond formed under unusual circumstances, but you're wrong about what makes a good queen. He turned to face the assembled packs. I've spent 3 years being careful, keeping everyone at a distance, refusing to trust, refusing to feel, because I was terrified of being hurt again. And then I met someone who was just as broken as me, just as afraid, and she taught me that being broken doesn't mean being worthless. He reached for Celeste's hand again, pulling her close. She's stronger than half the nobles in this room, smarter than most, and she sees me, truly sees me, not as a crown or a title, but as a person. That's what makes her worthy, not her bloodline, not her connections, but her heart. This is highly irregular. Cooper tried again. So, is attempting a political coup through marriage, Marcus said, stepping forward. We have evidence, Beta Cooper. Messages between you and the Southern Pax, plans to challenge the king's authority, promises of power and position if they support your daughter's claim. He looked at the High Elder. I formally charge Beta Cooper with conspiracy and treason. The hall erupted in chaos. Guards moved to restrain Cooper, who was protesting loudly. Lydia was crying, looking between her father and Louis with confusion. And Louis was staring at Celeste with something like regret. I'm sorry, he mouthed. Celeste felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, just a calm certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The High Elder called for order, and after much deliberation, ruled that the challenge was invalid, brought in bad faith by someone with ulterior motives. Cooper was stripped of his position and exiled. Lydia, deemed innocent of her father's schemes, was sent back to Brackenmore in disgrace, and Celeste was formally recognized as the king's chosen mate. That night, after the chaos had settled and the last of the delegates had retired, Celeste found Colton on the balcony outside his chambers. He was staring up at the moon, his profile sharp in the silver light. Regret it yet? She asked softly. He turned, and the smile that crossed his face was genuine, warm, free of the walls he'd kept up for so long. Not even a little. He held out his hand. Come here. She went to him, letting him pull her into his arms. The bond between them hummed content, settled, right. I meant what I said in there, Colton murmured against her hair. About you seeing me. No one else has ever done that. I meant what I said too, Celeste replied, about loving you. He pulled back just enough to look at her face, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. I spent years afraid of this, of feeling anything real. And then you stumbled into my life, crying in a tavern, and I couldn't help myself. Some might say I saved you, actually. You did. He kissed her softly. You absolutely did. So, she said eventually, what happens now? Colton's smile turned wicked. Now you learn all the truly terrible parts of being queen, the endless meetings, the formal dinners, the way nobles will try to use you for their own advancement. Sounds awful. It is. He kissed her again, deeper this time. But you'll have me, for whatever that's worth. It's worth everything, Celeste said, and meant it, because she'd started this journey broken, desperate, convinced she was worthless, and she'd found someone who looked at all her shattered pieces and said, yes, you, always, you. Thank you so much for listening. Where are you listening from? Let's meet in the comments. I love hearing your thoughts, and if you'd like to support me, please subscribe. It's free, and it helps more people hear these stories.